All right, guys, we've got a encounter sent in that I wanted to share with you guys, and I think Sarah may use it tonight on her live. I'm not sure, but this is a pretty weird one, so we'll get into it. An evil spirit appeared inside of my nightmares, is what she is saying about this. When I was around 12 or so, my mom and I lived in an apartment in Texas. She was a single mom, so it was just her and I for many years. I was and still am very fortunate that she puts me first and did her best to make sure I had what I needed. Unfortunately, her work schedule didn't allow for her to be home when I got off out of school. So I usually had to take care of myself in the afternoons until she got off. It wasn't too bad. Usually by the time I fixed myself a snack and got through the homework, she was home. I've had to do that a lot myself. I should note that at this time I was still sleeping with my mom. I initially started out in my own room, but I began having these horrible nightmares. It was the same dream each time. I was sleeping in my room and I could see a figure lurking in the hallway. I'd get up to turn on the light and someone would grab my hand and it would instantly wake me up. The touch of that hand was the closest feeling I'd ever experienced. It was so terribly scary. It was so vivid in my mind. I felt incredibly sad, almost like the happiness was drained out of me, starting to make excuses about wanting to sleep with her. My mom never made a big fuss about it. We would stay up late reading on a regular basis and I would accidentally fall asleep. I hated, and she emphasizes, I hated that room and avoided going in there at all costs. It got so bad that every morning before school I would lay out a change of clothes in the living room so I could have them ready when I got home. My mom started to notice this routine and asked why I didn't just simply change in my room. I just made up some stupid excuse and brushed it off. I kept my bedroom door shut all the time, and I would hurry past it if I needed to go to the restroom. The dream seemed to stay away once I stayed in my mom's room. It had been so long that I started to forget about them. One night my mom had already fallen asleep, but I was still nose deep in the latest library book. It was late, definitely past midnight, when I got an eerie feeling. I couldn't place it, but it was instantly uncomfortable. I put my book down and noticed a lump under the covers toward the end of the bed. We had a cat at the time, but I knew it wasn't her because she hated anything on top of her. I stared at the lump and it started to move toward me. I froze. Every fiber in my body was screaming to move, but was paralyzed with fear. I finally mustered up a weak mom and nudged her, all while keeping an eye on the lump. Finally, my mom woke up, and as soon as she woke, the covers went completely flat, like a balloon whose air had been released. I went into a crying fit, told my mom what had happened. She assured me that I was reading too much scary stuff before bed and my eyes had played tricks on me. I convinced myself that she was right, and I went to sleep. One weekend I had a friend sleep over. My mom made a big deal about preparing my room for my friend and thought that maybe since I wouldn't be alone, that it would be fine for us to stay in there with no issues. We did the whole typical sleepover shenanigans, played with each other's hair and gushed over our latest crush while listening to the newest NSYNC CD. I started to get anxiety as bedtime loomed closer. I somehow convinced my friend that it would be better if we made a bed on the floor in my mom's room because my room got hot or some, she says, SH word like that. We quietly moved to my mom's room on the next floor, next to her bed, and fell asleep. Sometime in the middle of the night, I woke instantly. I sat straight up. I was staring at a lump at the foot of my mom's bed. Suddenly, I became overwhelmed with the urge to touch it. I lifted the sheet and placed my hand upon the smoothest object I'd ever touched. I instantly felt very happy memory being sucked away from my body. All thoughts, emotions were drained. I felt cold, colder than any weather I'd been through. I became empty like a shell person. Nothing was left but numb darkness. It was as if I was under a trance. I somehow was able to pull my hand away, and I threw myself against the wall. I stared at the lump until I fell asleep. The next morning, I retold what happened to my mom, and she broke down in tears. She thought that this was all behind us, but clearly it was more than she previously thought. I didn't do much that day. My mom busied herself with Sunday chores while I stared blankly at the TV as she stepped out for a bit to do some laundry. She ran into our neighbor. Her name has left me, but I remember her being a caring figure in my life and a wonderful friend to my mother. My mom confided in her about all the odd occurrences, and her face went grim. Our neighbor was Native American and was super in tune with the culture and traditions. She explained to my mother that for some time she's had a feeling of a presence, but she could not place it. Its origin was unknown to her. My mom asked her to come inside and speak with me. She agreed, but upon stepping out the door, she retreated. She said the origin was our apartment and the spirit would not allow her to cross the threshold. At this point, my mom was hysterical, as most mothers would be if someone told them an evil being was possessing her and her daughter's home. Our neighbor apologized, but promised she would gather what she could and help us. In the meantime, my mom reached out to my grandmother. Not that shit wasn't already weird, but shit got even weirder. My grandmother immediately told my mom to call my uncle. He had phoned my grandmother earlier in the day asking about me, but didn't say as to why he was concerned, so my grandmother pretty much brushed it off. My mom called my uncle, and as to the reason, as soon answered the phone. He said, I've been waiting on your call. We need to act now. It still gives me chills to talk about it. We weren't close with my uncle at all and hadn't talked to him in years. He told us that an evil spirit had possessed our home and he was going to help us get rid of it. He sent us a bottle of oil that was supposedly poured upon where Jesus was laid to rest. I feel as if a bit was of a crock, but whatever. It made it sound pretty legit. He instructed us to bless all doors, entryways. This meant every door, closet, and window. He gave us a prayer to repeat, told us to make the sign of the cross over each one. Our neighbor had also given us a dream catcher to place upon the bed frame that night and blessed the house. She made us swear to stay in our bedroom that night and not emerge until morning. My mom and I quickly blessed the house and both passed out exhaustion. The night was the first night I had slept soundly since we moved in. My mom, however, laid awake the entire night. Whatever we did must have really pissed off the spirit. She said she told me to put her back toward the window as someone or something howled, crying the entire night. It was terrifying, screams as if realization had sunk in, that we had shut the spirit out and it was no longer welcome. She said that night was the longest night of her life. To this day, I have no clue what we experienced, but I know that it beat on the doors and the windows trying to get into our home. It was so crazy and scary that night. I will never forget the screams and the howls and the scratching at the windows and the beating on the doors and the doorknobs rattling. Sometimes felt like the whole walls were rattling and you could hear it screaming and growling and moaning, trying to enter into our home. It was so terrifying. I will never forget those days. It is burned into my mind. I can still hear the screams and the noises at night. I pray that it never finds me again. Thank you for letting me share my story with Abnormal Investigations. I don't know about the oil, being where Jesus was at. I think he probably sent him some oil that was probably blessed. I'm not saying it wasn't there, but I'm saying it was probably blessed. As far as the dream catcher, I'm Native American myself, and I understand, the dream catcher is part of the culture, but I also know that the dream catcher is paganistic, and I would not trust a dream catcher or use a dream catcher to try to stop anything like that. I would just rely on the blood of Jesus and call upon Jesus. He's all that we need, in my opinion, and that's where I would have based what I would have done. But I wanted to share this with you guys. It's a pretty scary story. I think we can all relate to something scary happening in our house, and I think a lot of us have had things like that happen. Maybe not necessarily exactly like that, but things that has happened that we've had to run out of our homes and maybe even our friends' homes. But I want to thank each and every one of you for listening to this. Thank you for being there, and we will see you tonight on the live at 6 o'clock p.m. Central Standard Time. Don't forget that is tonight on the live, 6 p.m. Central Standard Time. And I think Sarah will probably discuss this story. Thank you guys for watching, and God bless.